What happened to the bad kids you went to school with? The girl that was my worst bully is in prison on murder charges. She and her boyfriend robbed a bowling alley she worked at and killed her boss. The rest are strippers or are in and out of the prison system. Guy I went to Catholic school with killed his elderly female neighbor with a hammer. He was executed about 5 years ago. Jesus. Stoner. Guitar playing band boy TM now is a professor with tenure at a prestigious university. Teaches music theory, so at least that is consistent. Yeah, the biggest stoner in our class received an award at the end of senior year for having a 4.0 all 4 years of high school. The teachers weren't really sure why we were all giggling when they called his name. One guy who picked on me in high school ended up working under me a couple years later. I was like 20 and basically led hand for a small shift of overnight workers at a blue collar plant. Having all the maturity of your typical 20-year-old, I always gave him the shittiest tasks until he finally quit. Taught me 2 lessons. First, petty revenge is fun. Second, it is probably best if I don't hold management type positions. Our petty revenge would like you. One just got arrested for stealing a cop's gun and giving it, not selling, just giving it away, to a convict who was on parole for gun violations. 10 or so have already had kids and have moved to random parts of the country. One died of HOD. One committed suicide. Most actually just work at auto shops. As far as I know. Source: I used to hang out with a lot of the bad kids. I've managed to find a few of the ones I knew on Facebook, and the 10 years since high school seems to have changes some, others not so much. The biggest bully of my class is serving a very lengthy sentence for beating a cop until he was a quadriplegic. The second biggest bully I knew is doing some type of construction job, and seems to be doing pretty well for himself, with a wife and 2 kids. The biggest stoner I knew joined the Marine Corps, which is pretty surprising. He has a lot of pictures of himself doing outdoorsy type things. The goth kid who everyone thought would go Columbine is now working at a pizza place. Still looks pretty goth-like. Guess it wasn't just a fad. The rich mean girls type pretty girl is still rich. And still pretty. Her boyfriend looks a lot like Ryan Gosling. She's a nurse now. Biggest shocker was the frick this place guy. He's doing a long prison sentence for beating an off-duty cop until he was a quadriplegic. Biggest bully I ever knew. Still never thought he'd go that far. A lot of police beat into quadriplegics like holy crap. A kid who couldn't maintain academic standards for our freshman football team, no Fs, and was well known to be into the school drug trade now has 40k Twitter followers and wrote several articles for Playboy. I thought for far too long about the relationship between Warhammer and Playboy. I am very tired. There was a kid from my elementary school who lived 2 doors down from my childhood home. He who would bully me and my family incessantly for the better part of a decade when I was younger. It was terrible. He would pick on me and brother on our walks home from school, throw garbage at our house, call us names, carry out minor acts of vandalism on our house. Just general stupid crap that kids do. I think he came from a broken home, and his mother, no sign of the father, would just sit and sunbathe and watch all this crap go down. Good parenting. The kid dropped out of high school a year or 2 in and basically became a bum and all potential substance abuser. A few years ago I learned that he was living and partying it up in Thailand. Apparently, he was pulled under a train and died. The circumstances are unclear, but the rumor is that drugs and or alcohol may have been involved. Upon learning this, I didn't feel anything in particular. Kind of like, oh, okay, I didn't necessarily wish bad things to happen to him, but I can't say that I was all too surprised to learn of his fate. You reap what you sow, I guess. It's a real shame that he didn't make better choices in life. Not long after that, I learned that the kid's older brother, not as much of a bully, as I recall, was killed in a motor vehicle collision in Malaysia. Now, that's really unfortunate. Altogether there were 3 kids in that family, the 2 boys and the girl. The girl was in my class at school. I wonder how she's doing. I hope she's okay. From what I remember, she seemed cool, for the most part, except for that one time she chased me around with a water gun on the street in front of my house. I'm gonna be honest, if I could choose my way to go, partying in Thailand would be somewhere at the top of the list. Whenever I had a bad day at school with bullies, my mother used to tell me about a kid that pulled her hair in grade school and bullied her all the time. She used to relate with a calm smirk that about 5 years out of high school he was found shot to death in the trunk of a car. I always thought she had something to do with it or wished she had. Nah, she's just oddly attached to a very petty grudge. The one guy that bullied me ended up working for Chick-fil-A and is now a district manager for the franchisee in the area. He has a nice wife and is expecting. I ran into him a few years ago. He apologized for being a dong to me. Apparently he was angry at the time because I was in both the special education classes and the gifted and talented program. He was just in the special ed classes. He's way more successful than me now. I don't dislike him or anything. It just goes to show what motivation and a good work effort can get you. I wish him all the best. One kid, never even graduated, lives down the road from me. I can't even make up some of the ridiculous crap he does. His driver license is suspended, so I've seen him riding around on a chopper bicycle. It's decked out in Shapire drawings, an American flag jabbed into the seat, and I believe a Romney Ryan sticker. Most recently I walked past his house and saw a plastic chair, table, and a grill perched up on the garage roof. It beats me how he managed to get it all up there. Ah, yes, the DUI lifestyle. I will always remember a guy who used to pick on me in school. It started in elementary when he'd pick on my friends and I'd try to stand up for them, so he'd just pick on me. He was such a jerk and was unliked by virtually everyone. In high school I remember finding out that he had killed himself by hanging himself with his father's tie. Supposedly his dad was more concerned about the tie than his own son. It really made me wish I had just tried to talk to him. As they say, hurt people, I'll never forget him. His dad was more concerned about the tie than his own son. Holy crap. Well, one of the bad kids I used to hang with is a skinhead with 5 kids. So, yay, another is dead. He was tweaking and ran onto the freeway and was hit by like 5 cars. This was in the mid-90s. Everyone else is dong alright, although it's kind of freaking me out how many people have died from cancer at this point. Everyone else is dong alright. Back when I was still dating my wife, so, pre-marriage, her brother introduced me to his best friend, who I got pretty close with. We had a lot in common, played music together, had the same sense of humor and smoked weed together. One day we got pretty high and he told me about the horrible people he went to high school with and brought up this girl who was like the Regina George of his high school, except in his words, worse. She was elitist, a bully, and scarred a lot of kids in school with her mean remarks regarding their style choice, social standing and family's financial instability. I could relate, so I told him my story about a similar girl who went to high school with me. We then compared our stories and came to the conclusion that his Regina George was worse. Fast forward a few years later to a few months ago, I find out that his Regina George is my wife. So yeah. I bullied someone in high school. Badly. Years later I called him up and apologized. And so he crossed your name off of his people to kill list. The worst one was a Kurdish guy. In elementary school he was like, "Do you think I am stronger? Let's fight." He had always aggression problems. Later in high school, he was already a criminal. Beat people and stole their cell phones. Sold them. He changed schools but he was still notorious. He was involved in a huge fight in front of my school. They hit each other with wooden batons. It was crazy. One had even a blank gun, which is a big deal in Germany because we don't have free weapons and stuff. He was in juvenile prison. In his early 20s he was a C addict and sold drugs. I once saw him with a real thug type with a white Porsche. That was when he thought he is untouchable because he know the tough guys. He and his mates beat the Africans who owned the park and a nearby subway station where they sold drugs. He forced some of them to sell for him. You would always see him with fancy cars drifting through the streets and stuff. Always on the white powder. Things changed when he kicked the door in of a big drug dealer who lives with wife and kids. He's the kind of shabby guy but knows everyone in the city. Spent lots of time in prison and has protection from the local bandidos. This Kurdish guy didn't know that. Tried to break in but failed. The drug dealer did not expect that such a small timer breaks into his flat. He thought some real bad guys are coming. He hid wife and kid, called some people and looked for that Kurdish guy. He found him and that guy got the worst beating ever. They kidnapped him and his Turkish friend, who was a same thug, and drove them to a roadhouse in Belgium, where they stripped of their clothes and led them naked somewhere on a Belgium highway. After this incident, they knew they cannot frick around with the big guy. The Turkish dude died a few years ago when he jumped from a building while escaping from the cops. He punched a taxi driver and ran away because he didn't have money. Since then, the Kurd became legal, opened his shisha cafe which failed. Since then no one ever heard of him. Rumors say he went back to school to get his university entrance qualification. He didn't graduate high school after he got caught cheating on a final. At 19 years old he was in a DUI accident that killed a good friend of mine. He did 18 months for involuntary manslaughter. He's been in and out of jail for the last 10 years on various drug charges and probation violations. Some got pregnant and never got a chance to pursue careers. Some grew up, regretted their actions and made something of themselves. Some got a low-paying job and just live day to day, and all of that is fine. Really, it's cool, even. I'm happy for them all. Hard drugs, pregnant has a baby, still stuck in our hometown, or all of the above. One guy got sucked into a pyramid scheme. I haven't seen him since I moved. Wonder how that's going. My worst bully got kicked out of our high school, much to my relief. He was awful and truly delighted in seeing me cry on a daily basis. I learned later from a classmate that he tried to snort paint thinner and ended up with brain damage or something to that effect. Yikes. Jamie dropped out and had a couple of kids. Mark lives at home cause he's not go job, just plays guitar and smokes a lot of pot. Jay committed suicide. Brandon OD'd and died. I married him. He was one of the big stoners from my high school. I was the typical band nerd, graduated with honors from HS and college. We were pretty opposite, personality wise. We met up again by chance 3 years after our high school graduation. He had really matured and stopped smoking by that time. He turned out to be quite the charmer. I was thinking about some American Pie reference at the beginning. Good for you. Some of them are doing surprisingly well, none of them going to college but holding down jobs. I do have a bigger story about one, though. There was a kid in my high school who used to gamble a lot and ended up getting lent a lot of money. This was around 11th grade, around 5-6 grand. He didn't pay it back, and word got around that he was being looked for by a bunch of drug dealer types. Last thing I heard was that he set someone on fire after an argument and headed straight to state pen. He's a quarterback at Oregon now. I'm pretty sure the bad kid deal was an act so that we would leave him alone so he could play the guitar. I wish the dude the best of luck. The couple that made a DVD of their prom night and sold it on the internet didn't make it. Shocker. He's a youth minister now. She's a stay-at-home mom with fibromyalgia. I'm sure I spelled that wrong, but I'm too lazy to Google it and not lazy enough to now write out this explanation. Our school didn't have bad kids in the sense that they bullied people, as far as I know. Most of the popular kids though now have multiple kids and no job, are divorced, about to be divorced, or have baby daddy's mamas. They also post things on Facebook that, although amusing, is pretty sad when you really think about it. Most of them work some sort of manual labor construction or welding job and have 2-3 kids and a wife in rural North GA. Hello neighbor. Hey went off the deep end with drugs and crap, was in a coma for a while. Now he runs a redemption center near where I live and seems to have his crap together. Happy for him. Not really a post about how his life turned out, but in 5th grade kids were starting to call each other gay and other words as insults. I hadn't hit puberty yet and my voice was still very feminine. Well, these kids started targeting me because we were all in the same class. They pushed my friends away from me because they didn't want to be associated with a gay. Things were pretty rough but didn't affect me because I didn't really care yet what people thought of me. Fast forward through about 10th grade, these same group of kids were the cool kids, played football, were pretty popular, attractive, had wealthy parents, etc. They still picked on me until I eventually came out, and then all of a sudden no one cared because they couldn't pick on me for something that everyone knew. So there I was, 19 years old, playing WoW at my mom's house after I dropped out of college, and one of these guys messages me at 3 in the morning. I was like WTF, and then I kept on talking to him. He seemed okay considering we had never really had a real conversation in the 12+ years we had known each other. This happened a few more times until eventually he wanted to hang out. Well, there he was in my bedroom at 4 in the morning. We had sex, and then he left. Hasn't talked to me since. TLDR. Grade school gay basher came to my house at 4 AM and we had sex. Fellow bad kid here. I vandalized my school extensively when I was in grade 9 with a friend one night and caused $90,000 in damages to the school by turning off their HVAC units in the middle of winter. I was obviously expelled and had to go on youth probation and pay a fine, and it was a crappy time. So I think I qualify as the bad kid of the school. Anyways, where am I now? Because of the youth probation, I was ordered to do 50 hours of community service. I went to a YMCA, or a boys and girls club of my town, volunteered to be their IT administrator, and got the experience on my resume, which landed me another 2 years at an IT company doing Windows 7 deployments and break fix of desktop, laptop and printer hardware. I have now completed my second round of interviews at an accounting firm as their local IT guy. I really don't regret what I have done, as it has helped me gain the experience needed to get my foot in the door with my career. Over the years I've heard of or bumped into the bullies from my high school and primary school. Some are dead, some are morbidly obese. A slim minority picked up their acts and actually became worthwhile members of society. One in particular is now couch surfing, always briefly because people get sick of him quickly, has been shot at least once, pisses off the wrong people, is going from job to job as he keeps getting fired, and even his parents want nothing to do with him anymore. It makes me so happy. That may be a mean thing to say, but he made my life heck. The bully from my grade school is actually a pretty good guy. He still has a temper, but when I got to talk to him, he's actually pretty cool. He's a traffic enforcer at our hometown now. He lived up the street from me in this dumpy little house with his dumpy mother. He was always in butthole but found himself being a volunteer fireman. A couple years after we graduated, I hear that he was arrested in West Virginia for arson. Turns out he would set the fire, then go back to the station and wait for it to get called in. He would then go fight his own fires. I'm a stoner. Never was a bully though, and don't consider myself a bad kid for being a stoner. I am now studying to be an actuary at college. For those who don't know what that is, it's basically statistics applied to finance, and have an average of about 9.0 out of 10. Some got good jobs, some didn't. Some sell drugs, others are using them. Turns out their lives weren't defined during high school. That's brilliant and all, but we're here for stories. One went to prison for armed robbery of multiple gas stations. Another shot himself when confronted by police for drug possession intent to sell. He died. Also, one of the bullied kids committed suicide. I graduated in 2014. Jesus frick. The kid was a typical redneck, about 2 years ahead of me, and a giant dong to everyone. Got called up to do some farm work last summer in my hometown. And guess who happened to be called in as well? I hated him in high school, but after seeing him again, I just pity him. The guy has no prospects and no real skills to get anywhere, and he's still a raging butthole. No clue. I keep in touch with no one from high school. Absolutely no one. No one from middle school, either. No one from elementary, either. This guy is probably the exception, but he had a really rough time of pretty much everything. Anyway, he definitely did not give a crap going into high school. He didn't even expect to graduate, but our PASS program, basically classes for troubled kids, had a couple of teachers that proved to him they cared, and taught him that he could do what he dreamed of. They were the people that turned him from school doesn't matter to I can do this. Education is the only way to reach my dream. And he received a scholarship on senior awards night and then graduated a month later. He He is going to college in the fall. There are also plenty of kids from my school who never figured out how to care, but to be honest, I'm not gonna remember them, but I will remember this kid. One of them got busted making M in his dorm room. He got caught because apparently it never occurred to him to make sure his roommate was cool with it. They had to find other housing for everyone in the dorm because of the risk from all the toxic fumes. One of the ones I didn't particularly like spent about 3 years locked up. Now he works in a kitchen and probably will forever. One of the guys that I thought was a good kid ended up going out with one of his friend when they were 15 and killing a retarded guy walking down the street for the like $10 in his pocket. The bad boys of my school were the popular kids. A few of them actually got really fat and hang around the shops near my old high school, trying to retain their popularity. A few went to college that I'm currently attending, but they aren't even taking classes. Just walking around looking for the next person they know to talk to. The truth is that it doesn't matter how popular you are in school, that crap doesn't apply in the real world and it sure ain't going to get you a good job. Joined the military because what the heck else were they going to do? Return to society as heroes eventually. Now they spend their days complaining to Facebook about how they can't find any kind of decent jobs. I am very pro-military and this is not meant to bash them, but the vast majority of morons and freak-ups from my high school joined the military. She has 4 kids, is dating a gang member, in and out of prison and definitely a drug addict. Guess you can say she deserved it. Guy who bullied me all through middle school and high school bagged my groceries and helped me load them into my car. He thought my car was nice, pointed out his beat up pickup truck in the lot. I tipped him $10 and waited until I was on the road to laugh hysterically. Parents who have had their children be bullies, or reported to have been mistreating their classmate. How did you find out? And how did it make you feel? What happened after? I feel like only good parents who actually acknowledged and subsequently addressed the problem will comment here. The answer we probably won't see, despite it being very common, is I ignored it. The other kid was the bully, deserved it. If they even knew or admitted it to themselves to begin with. I had a problem with my daughter beating up kids in preschool, of all things. I guess it can happen at any age. We had some major changes at home at the time and she was acting out. The teachers brought it to my attention and it was handled right away. Thankfully this was years ago and we haven't had problems since. I will tell you that I was strangely grateful my daughter was the bully and not the victim. But probably for a different reason than you would expect. Because she was the bully, I could correct the issue. I can't control someone else's kid when I'm not around. I never really thought of it that way, but you're right. It's much easier to address a problem behavior in your own child than someone else's, especially at such a young age. I worked at a children's mental health clinic for over a year. We got lots of bullies, but one girl told us that her mom makes her bully other kids. We talked to mom and she claimed that if her daughter was hurting kids first, then she wouldn't get bullied herself. About a week later, the mom vanished, running away from police for drugs or murder or something crazy, and the daughters went to foster care. No more bullying problems after that. Poor kid. Good to see that the parents here are mostly proactive about correcting bullying. Not a parent, but a teacher. There's a 6th grader in our school who is always in trouble for hurting kids, even those much younger, destroying school property and general disrespect. For example, I witnessed him yelling at the admin of the school, "Buttholes. You're all buttholes," in front of some little kids I handle. Naturally we would see his mom in the principal's office a lot. Instead of acknowledging that maybe her kid is in the wrong, his mom would side with the kid, blame the other children and question the credentials of the teachers handling her son's incidents. Little wonder his behavior never gets corrected. We suspect the child has mental health issues, but the denial is strong in the mother. My eldest daughter, a few years ago, she was 9, decided to hang around with the wrong crowd. After a week or so, her mother and I got a call to come in for a chat. And we learned that she'd been joining in the bullying of another girl in the same class and how the other girl had ended up breaking down in tears at the thought of going to school. When we got her home that afternoon, my daughter and I had a brief discussion about respect and morality. Read. I asked her if she'd enjoy receiving the same treatment she'd been giving, elaborating somewhat on the details. After crying herself to sleep that night, she woke up early and spent 2 hours making an apology card. That was the last time we had a call about her and bullying, until she kicked her little brother's bully in the head a year later. She got to choose what we had for dinner that night. That was the last time we had a call about her and bullying, until she kicked her little brother's bully in the head a year later. She got to choose what we had for dinner that night. Hahaha, she let you down once, and went on to make you proud. My niece recently got in huge trouble when it was discovered she was bullying a first grader. She's in the 5th grade, but it's not like it matters. The school called one day and told my brother and his fiance. When my brother found out, he was really disappointed in her since she's been bullied. He is being bullied and it's something they bonded over and talked about a year or so ago. She was apathetic to the whole thing, which really made my brother angry, so she's grounded for the next while. She immediately started crying, wailing, throwing a temper tantrum, you name it. That's a power thing. She wouldn't bully someone older, but younger kids are easy targets for her feelings. She obviously has something going on that's bothering her big time. This is my unprofessional mama opinion. My teenage boys were driving past an apartment complex yelling at kids. They were being dongs. I would not have known if someone hadn't posted about it in the town's Facebook page. I privately messaged the mom of the kid they were yelling at. I then drive them to the apartment complex and made them apologize to the kid, in front of his parents too and grandmother. They were unable to go to town without adult supervision for a few weeks. I was not amused. You sound like a pretty super mom to me. My kid was the bullied one, but I know what happened. So, my son goes to a special needs school. He kept coming home with bites on his arm. He was reluctant to tell us who was doing it, but he eventually named 2 people and we figured out which one it was. The kid who bites people regularly. Surprisingly, the school told the mum and she broke down. I felt so bad for her. I mean, I don't want my kid bitten, but I wasn't angry. We're all in the same boat and I know how hard it can be to get our kids to understand. Her daughter is severely autistic, non-verbal, and they were probably fighting over the class iPad or something. So no hard feelings from me. The teachers kept a closer eye on them when they were together and it stopped. I imagine they would have concentrated on the problem in therapy for the next few weeks. No harm done really. In kindergarten, my daughter's teacher approached me after school one day when I was picking her up. She said how normally my kid was helpful and fun, etc. But that today she seemed distant and kicked another child during a coloring activity. I told the teacher that her mom and I had just separated and that I was thankful for her telling me. On our walk home, my daughter and I had a really long chat about things at home. Her mom, me, life in general. She had lots of questions and we hashed everything out. Next day, she got her little gold stars for good behavior and we haven't looked back. Stupid office onions. Not my kid or relative by my then BF's niece. I'm still close to the family, so I still hear issues. Basically, parents went through a nasty divorce. Mom, who worked in the school system, wasn't really paying attention to the kids, twins, and was really using them more as a show off to make it look like she was an awesome parent in social media. The elder of the twin, she was 13 at the time, started to act out. Claimed she was being bullied, developed an eating disorder which the parents denied until doc says so. She pretty much grew up to be like that Cash Me on the Outside girl from Dr. Phil. Girl loved the spotlight. She played victim a lot even though some were true. She tried to hit on one of popular gal's BF and got some nasty repercussions from that. She did her own cyberbullying of other PPL. Worse, she was a bully to her own family and grandparents. At 15 she tried to hit her grandma. She was sent to a facility, diagnosed with bipolar and some other weird crap. No longer welcome to grandparents' house until she's stable. Sadly, her parents still neglect her and I doubt she will change anytime soon. The elder of the twins. I do not understand. Not a parent but an aunt. My nephews were born 1 month apart and grew up closely. It was actually quite amazing to see 2 little boys grow so differently and yet manage to do everything together. The younger nephew started to hoard toys or books from the older one. It seemed harmless and gave me an opportunity to teach about the joys of sharing. This pattern continued until I noticed the younger nephew was pretty much using the older as his personal bee. It may be important to note that the older cousin was shorter and stockier, so perhaps the younger felt as if he was the alpha nephew. Anyway, boys will be boys. They play fought and wrestled often, and this continued until one day I got sneaky. I walked down the hallway to their playroom after noticing how quiet it had fallen. I could hear the younger commanding the older to remove his clothes and get under a blanket. I walked in to find the younger nephew holding a loaded Nerf gun to the older's head as he tried to undress. I immediately put a stop to this and tried to explain that your privates are extremely private and shouldn't be included in the laws of sharing. That was the last incident, and shortly after the older nephew's mother enrolled him in jujitsu and he's never been a victim again. A timely question. Last week, during the first puck drop of a home hockey game, my son, the backup goalie, threw down another teammate on his bench. That teammate wasn't dressed in hockey gear because he was out with an injury. My son punched him in the helmet 3 times. It looked brutal. He was viewed as the perpetrator. Upon further investigation, though, the authorities at the school discovered my son had been bullied by this kid for years. My son beat his bully down like a bad butt. Not that I condone what he did. He got suspended and I backed the school's decision 100%. However, I did object to the label that my son was the bully. The school has now punished the other kid for bullying, too. I'm so sad this has happened. But I'm also pretty cool with the fact that I don't think anyone is going to mess with my son again. That teammate wasn't dressed in hockey gear because he was out with an injury. My son punched him in the helmet 3 times. What? This thread reminded me of the time I accidentally bullied someone. Still feel terrible. It was 5th grade, right before I switched out of public school, because frankly the middle school was a crap show. At the Halloween dance, there were tons of categories and contests for costumes at night. A girl I barely knew approached me and said so and so was crying in the bathroom because of me. I was confused, and I followed her even though she honestly seemed pee. The crying girl was indeed crying. Apparently I said she was ugly. I thought about that and realized I had acted surprised she was entering a beauty contest because she was dressed as a monster. I hadn't meant she was ugly. I had meant it was weird to enter a monster costume in a beauty contest. I was, and still am, far too little and often speak before thinking. So, I stared at the floor in shame and tried to explain as best I could, and then I fled. I hope she understood what I meant and that night didn't mess her up badly. Sorry, former classmate. I still have foot and mouth syndrome. There's a huge difference between what you did and bullying, though. You're good. Teacher here. 9 in 10 parents are bullies too, which is where the behavior comes from. Many times, they refuse to accept the truth about their kids, and the kids themselves could be unaware too. I remember when I was about 9 I actually got bullied by a teacher, of all people, in the Catholic school I went to. I honestly have no idea why an adult professional would choose to pick on a kid, but she did, and I've since chalked it up to her being crazy. Anyways, this teacher was witchy and bizarre, with drawn-on eyebrows, excessively permed hair, and rather youngish and thin, except she chose to dress like an old lady. One day I was giving out cake to my classmates for my birthday and I blurted out that I wanted to save the slice of cake with the flower on it for my favorite teacher, which wasn't her. And that was when she yelled at me in front of the class that I was fat and greedy, and I was super embarrassed. She started to single me out after that, sending me to sit and face the wall in front of the class for reasons ranging from an incorrect answer to not looking interested enough in her lessons. She would also give treats and prizes to the class and make a big deal singling me out by not giving me any. In addition, she would make me stay in for recess because she didn't like how my fine hair got tangled, so she would make me sit with her at lunch while she combed it. It was all really weird. The final straw came when I started crying a lot at home, and some of the staff called my parents to report that I wasn't eating and they were afraid I was showing signs of an eating disorder. It was then that I broke down and told my folks everything that had been happening, fearing I would get in trouble. Instead, my parents went into the office with other parents who had previously complained, and she got super fired. TLDR. Got bullied by a teacher and then my parents got her fired. Frick you, Miss Farah. I work for an airline and once received a call from a school that had booked a flight for a class of 6th graders. About a week before the trip, one of the boys in the class was heard taunting a girl who could not afford to go on the trip. The school called his single mother, who instructed the school to change the name on his airline ticket to that of the girl and have the girl go on the trip in his place. Mom even said she would pay any fees involved. I waived the standard name change fee and asked the school to pass along my compliments to the mother. Either that boy learned one hard lesson or he hated his mother for the rest of his life. I always wondered if I would have been courageous as that mother. She sounds awesome. The boy's mom. We were looking out of the window one day when we saw our two girls with the neighbor. One was standing with the neighbor distracting her while the other sneaked round the back and jumped her. We felt bad for the neighbor that our two were bullying her, but also proud that ours were working together and getting along. We decided not to punish ours and give them some fish bits instead as a treat. Cats are assholes and there's nothing you can really do about it. Starts reading and grabs pitchfork. Finishes story and puts down pitchfork. Dang you. I received a call from another parent when my daughter was in 3rd grade. Apparently, she and a few other girls started a mean girls club. They hung out in the bathroom at lunch and refused to let this little girl join. They also refused to let other little girls use their bathroom. I called the other moms and let them know what our daughters were doing. And I also talked with my daughter about being a nice girl, who people like and respect, versus being a mean girl who people hate and make fun of behind her back. I then drove home the grossness of hanging out in a bathroom of all places. The club disbanded, and I made a point of inviting the little girl over quite often. The other moms did similar things, and she became part of the friend group. The thing is, my daughter wasn't really a mean girl. She's actually very sweet. I don't know why the girls decided to take over the bathroom, but I do know what movie they watched that they got their name from. I still tease her about her little club occasionally. Girls at my middle school did this as well, except the parents and teachers knew about it and never did anything. Good on you for actually talking to your kid about it. Child therapist here. I don't have a story, but this may be relevant. I talk to my clients who have been bullied about what I call the bully trap. When presented with bullying, children typically have 3 options and all of them are bad. That can tell, which often exacerbates a problem. They can fight back, which often ends up with them in as much or more trouble than the instigator. Or they can ignore it, which often means it continues or escalates. Many kids will opt to bully others that are even more vulnerable, as a way of deflecting from themselves, or seeking to gain their own power back. It's not unusual to find that a bully is also a victim in their own right. Not a parent, but I was a kid who accidentally bullied my classmates. I was raised in a household where no jokes were off limits. I thought I was just teasing people and thought everyone kinda got but hurt way too easily. This happened from 6th grade to 8th, and I eventually stopped talking a lot and became the quiet kid cause I was too scared I would hurt someone's feelings if I talked. Plot twist. I picked on other kids at school from time to time. Pretty textbook stuff. I was insecure because I was awkward and chubby. So, I started being a comedian. Everybody loves somebody who makes people laugh, right? Except one of the main methods of getting laughs was to make jokes about other people. I grew out of it mostly by high school, but looking back on it, I kind of hate my younger self for it. I cringe now at the thought of being anything but kind to other people. It sucks. Sometimes you don't realize what you've done until it's just too late. Nobody killed themselves. I never got in serious trouble, anything like that. But somewhere in the space-time continuum, name of my classmate, is crying because of me, and that's simply unacceptable. Reach out to them. It may still bother them. I had someone who bullied me apologize and it meant a lot, even years after it all. Not a parent, but I was bullied in primary school when I was around 5. 4 boys decided I was their target. I've no idea why, but the school would do nothing about it. My mum went up to the school repeatedly, but they weren't interested. She wrote letters that went unanswered, so told me it wasn't the right way to handle the situation, but the only way to get anyone to understand was to do it back. I remember her telling me to wait until each of them were on their own and do what they'd done to me. Kicking, hitting, etc. I did. The school all of a sudden was interested, the boys' parents up in arms as their babies were being bullied. It was a small community, so the mums found out it was retaliation rather than me being a little crap. I can't remember much else, but I think I had a few days off as my mum described it, but sure it would have been a suspension for attacking 4 boys. Looking back, it seems weird a kid saying 4 other kids were attacking them at once was ignored, but one retaliating against bullies was instantly addressed. From my understanding, that's far too common. I suspect that it's because the bullies are from rich families. Not a parent, I'm the kid. There were these 2 meathead kids who were 4 years older than me that beat the ever-loving crap out me all the time. Smashed my head into sidewalks, punched me and kicked me a bunch. My dad taught me how to punch and fight because of them. I won sometimes. If I grabbed a stick I could sword fight their asses and they'd get beat back. Well, my mom understandably hated these kids and she was driving by when they were pummeling me one day and she grabbed the one that was smashing my head by his hands to yell at him. He was like, "Why are you holding my hand? Scared I'll hit you?" My mom said, "No, I'm afraid I'll hit you." She also slapped one of them once and it was awesome. Another time she picked me up from school for an appointment and they walked in front of her when she was doing 50 kph to moon her. After she slammed the brakes to not kill them, she put her car in neutral and rev bombed them, hitting VTEC gloriously. One of them tripped on his pants, they were so scared. I love my mom. Not a parent, but it happens to my sister. First time she was caught bullying, my grandpa gave her a very serious talk about its effects and consequences. Second time she was caught bullying, he beat the living crap out of her and asked her if she enjoyed it because that was what she was doing to those kids on a daily basis. She never bullied anyone again. I like the fact he talked to her about it first before disciplining her. I was severely bullied from K through 12. My adult life is an unrecoverable shambles and I never really had a childhood. I don't blame the kids, but parents, coaches, teachers who don't stop bullying should spend their lives in prison. Bullies ruined my life. Now I just wait for it to play out naturally so I don't let everyone down. Mine didn't go so hot. 6-year-old son got in trouble a few days in a row on the bus home from school to daycare. He was acting up a bit, and the teacher said he was being aggressive and screaming at a kid. She said it was out of character though and got a timeout and was all good. Next day he pinched a 4K girl hard, made her cry. I sat him down. He blamed this other kid saying he made him do it. Same kid he was screaming at the day before. I was upset with him. Took away all his Star Wars toys, said he'd get 1 toy back every day he was good and 1 would go on the garbage if I got a bad report. Also made him apologize to the girl. He loves Star Wars more than anything. After about a month of good reports he had earned all his toys back. I come to find out the other little crap who told him to pinch the girl had been bullying him pretty bad and gave him a bloody lip. He didn't tell me or the teacher or defend himself because he was afraid of getting into trouble and not getting a toy back that day. Talked to my son and found out the other boy, who was 2 years older and always getting in trouble, would pinch him, call him ugly and stupid on the playground and say he was going to kill him all the time. I felt like a walking piece of crap who wouldn't protect my own son or let him protect himself. I know there are a lot of crappy kids out there who do bully, but maybe don't rush in before hearing the kid out, especially if you've never had problems with them before. I guess it's also about figuring out all the details before reacting. My guess is most parents of bullies are buttholes and that's why their kids decide they should frick with other people for no reason. Bullies suck. I hate 8th grade because I got bullied for the whole year. All of that crap you hear kids do to avoid their bullies, walking certain paths in the hallway, eating lunch fast and whatnot. I did that in 8th grade to mitigate the bullying. Pathetic. The bullying only stopped when I literally had to fight my bullies. Let's just say I would be extremely peeved if my future children ever became bullies. No human should do that to another. Again, I don't like to recommend. I usually talk them through the process of what happens if they get in trouble, and if it's worth the risk. We talk about whether or not violence is actually the best option that they are comfortable with. Does it make them the same as the bully? Could they or someone else be injured? My finance's nephew was beating the heck out of kids at his high school. Fiance paid a bigger kid to put him on his butt until he learned his lesson. Kid hit him a few times and they never had another problem. My nephew. He was a small kid but he bullied other kids twice his size. We are Asian so he's small in the US. He started bullying when he was here in the Philippines. He push and shoves other kids when he was 3-4 years old in the school. He does not like when other kids does not talk to him, so he bullies them to become his friend. I know it's sad. His parents left him to work in US and left him with us. We thought he would change once he go to US with his mom and dad, but it was still the same. He fought and bullied kids twice his size and does not take crap from other kids. One time he bit a black kid and was asked why he did it, and his response was, "I was hungry. He looks like chocolate." We did not know what his problem was, but he went to therapy and got diagnosed with ADHD. Now he is off his meds now and became a very charismatic teenager. He's one of the school's science quiz representative and on the wrestling team. Sometimes you just need to talk to them and let them understand that you love them. Bullies becomes bullies when they have a crappy life at home. Like my nephew. As an uncle, I was proud that he was not being bullied even though he's so small. It was my concern when he moved to US. But at the same time I was scared because kids there are a bit more crazy than here. I am happy he has changed and looking to have a bright future. Second week of first grade, my son punched a 4th grader in the face for being rude and not letting him have fun too. Son got told he couldn't do some group activity between a couple of not his friends' kids. We had to give him a long talk about kindness and luck. The thing with bullies is most kids aren't bad, but instead are having fricked up life and home stuff happening. Puberty and hormones making them nutty. A secret, etc. It's acting out. Hey, I feel helpless in my life cause or XYZ, but I can feel powerful putting someone down. And I know kids whose parents are judgmental snobby method fuckers and then are shocked when their kids are as well. It's hard. There's not enough resources out there to focus on fixing the problem one child at a time, and a few lane sessions in the auditorium talking about it won't fix it. My daughter is not a bully and stands up for the kids who can't all the time. It doesn't win her many friends. Because she's a tattletale, she's working on creating a forum for girls that's all about kindness, empathy, and probably glitter and Lisa Frank. My little Johnny was just teasing. He'd never do anything cruel. That nasty little Jonas boy must have said something to set him off. If you're really looking for someone to blame, start with him. I think Johnny should be excused from homework tonight. He's been through enough, don't you think? My daughter is 4.5. Last week her teacher talked to her in front of me about spitting on a little girl. We have been having a lot of discussions about respect lately, so I was really disappointed and upset. Her side of the story was that the girl took her shovel and spit on her first. We still continued the discussion because it still wasn't appropriate and she had to color the other girl a picture apologizing. I also had to tell her that if someone is being mean or bullying her, she needed to tell a teacher and not to just react. Because at the end of the day the other girl told and nothing happened to her for what she did. All of this totally sucked, considering at home when her friends are over I teach her to handle her problems and not to tattle. At least you're having the discussion with her. I feel that's the importance here. You've made the effort, created dialogue regarding bullying. I don't have a kid, but my little brother who is 5 can be a little crap. Everyone loves him, but he has bad moments and we don't know why. I had just moved out and he was a bit young to understand why I wasn't there anymore, and apparently when it clicked in his head, he had a massive temper tantrum at school. Was throwing tables and chairs around the room and calling everyone little suckers. Apparently the class had to be evacuated whilst the teacher restrained him. My 5-year-old little brother, my mum, and stepdad were obviously peeved because he had just started playing up a little and they are still trying to sort his behavior out. But when they told me that, I felt terrible, but I couldn't help but laugh. A whole class got evacuated because a 5-year-old went crazy because of me. It's not technically bullying, but I thought I'd throw this story in here. He's fine now, sometimes has his moments, but what kid doesn't? Every kid will kid every now and then. I guess I'm just trying to find out the thought processes of the kids that go through these stuffs. As someone whose childhood got saddening as time went on, I never thought of picking on someone as an outlet. That said, I do know my emotions got darker on a whole. Humans are complex. Ex-bullies of Reddit, what was your turning point? We picked on this boy in grades 4 to 5, who was a little different. We would say he smelt and such. even made a game called Stinky Boy where we all ran away from him. The teacher made me sit with him for the year and I mocked him constantly. One day he invited me to his birthday. I was confused but still went. Turns out he thought I was his best friend and gave me one of 5 special sleepover invitations. He invited all of my friend group at the time, all of which made fun of him. I was the only kid out of our class of 30 he had invited to show up to this poor kid's birthday. He was so happy to see me. We played games all night and I had so much fun with him. Turns out the reason we thought he was smelly was because he had to wear the same pair of old cloths because his single father couldn't afford much else. Did I mention that his dad said to me that he had heard so much about me and how his son was so happy to have a friend like me? He even called my parents to tell them how happy he was that his son had finally found a friend. I hung out with him every snack time after that. Now in my final year of school I be sure to ask him what's up when I see him in the school as we grew apart and he finally found friends after I introduced him to some people. Looking back it makes me sad that kids can be so cruel. That poor kid. How sweet. I attended elementary, middle and a year of high school in an economically depressed working class town, where the mills had closed down and families were hanging on by threads, if at all. It was a nightmare, like living in a prison. Bullying was rampant through the entire culture. Even the teachers would bully kids in unspeakable ways. So yeah, to my shame, I also bullied kids, just as I was being bullied by others. When I moved away to a different city, where bullying was not part of the culture, I suddenly found that I had no desire to be mean to other kids. I no longer felt seeing people humiliated or afraid was funny or gratifying in any way, and not having to feel that way myself was absolutely liberating. In fact, I suddenly found it kind of repulsive on the rare occasion where I witnessed someone being bullied. I once saw a friend of mine bullying some nerdy kid, and actually found myself telling him to cut it out and leave him be. Something I would never have done in my previous schools. I myself never bullied anyone again after I left that crap town. Years ago there was an experiment where a rat would be given an electrical shock periodically at random intervals. He would become terribly stressed out and miserable, and start behaving neurotically. Then, a new rat would be introduced to the cage, and the rat that had been shocked would suddenly attack the new rat with a bizarre ferocity. Now the new rat would be stressed out, miserable and neurotic, but the shocked rat would calm down and be just fine, as if all the pain and fear that had been imposed on him had simply been transferred to the new rat. I think once you understand this about rats, you come to understand a lot about people. I'm a freaking rat. In middle school, me and another girl hit off really well because we both shared a love for video games and anime, and we always stuck up for each other because we did get teased a little for our hobbies. Fast forward to high school, I started hanging out with a group of cool girls, and they always made fun of my friend. Because I was with them, I thought it was okay to do it too. So I also teased her and left her out in a lot of my activities. This continued on for 2 years, and in the middle of our junior year she sent me a text message that made me reconsider probably every single life decision I've made. Hey Burp Brain, I've known you for almost 5 years and have always considered you as my best friend, but I know people move on and drift. That being said, if you don't want to hang out with me anymore, I wish you told me to my face instead of visibly moving away from me and mocking me. I wish you all the best. I sat on that for weeks and weeks, and finally during senior year, I left that group of girls, who I later found were not so cool, and decided to apologize to my friend. I said I was an idiot and I was so concerned with high school popularity I threw away probably my most important friendships. It's been another 5 years since then, and she and I are still really close. It's one point in our lives we don't talk about because I'm still really ashamed about it, but I'm glad she's forgiven me and has become one of my most supportive friends today. This is beautiful. I've often reflected on this, especially recently going to therapy, which involves a lot of childhood stuff. Simple version is that bullying was endemic in my life all the way through. My brother bullied me. Our dad was horrible to him in particular. The neighbors were murderous shitbags who used to kill our pets. damage our property and make our lives heck at every opportunity. School was top-down bullying in which anyone weaker was fair game to be tormented. I found solace outdoors as much as possible on my own or working with adults at weekends and holidays. I used to enjoy fighting. I removed pain, remorse, caring, empathy or desire from my feelings. My joy was making people angry enough to attack me then thump them a lot as I really did not give a frick about anything or anyone. Except one friend called Clee. She got through my armor and I really lived for the tiny moments I shared with her on the bus ride home. One day as I had finished fighting some poor kids on my way to sit beside her, I sat down to her asking me why I did that. I left school at 15 with this ringing in my head. Left home as soon as I legally could at 16. Past a group of kids my own age who tried to intimidate me as I passed by on a route I knew I was going to be using regularly. Decided I was done with the whole bull's cycle of abusive behavior, so walked right up to the whole group of them and offered to fight them all. I laughed at them when they backed down, went on my way. Took me a good few years to stop fighting at the drop of a hat, but a few rushes with the law brought that into focus. Not to mention a few beatings. Low, zero, self-esteem, lack of role models and a misguided love of physical violence made me a total of from 11-15, but a kind word from someone I realized was my only true friend at the time gave me the impetus to begin to grow. Now I work with kids and try to drop in little nudges myself. I use positive reinforcement, praise and crap ton of patience as well as being a good person to my colleagues for the pupils to see. So to Clee, wherever you are, I say a huge thank you. Clee, you the real MVP. I was a victim, not the bully, but I got to witness this moment. My elementary school didn't have a gym, so we'd walk a mile to the lake in the neighborhood to run laps, as it was almost a mile in circumference. Now, I had pretty bad asthma, which was often induced by exercise, and the school had a rule that all medication had to stay with a nurse on campus. My bully, let's call her Kat, started off with little things, like stabbing scissors through my pigtails into her desk so that when I tried to stand up, I would tear my hair out, or making fun of my being a Jew. It eventually advanced to the point where she would make openly anti-Semitic comments and write them up on the board. She would lock me in the bathroom by pushing a chair against the outside knob so I'd be stuck there until someone got me out. And at one point, she kicked my arm so hard that she caused severe damage to the muscle fibers, and I was in a sling for several months. One day, we had pay, and the teacher decided we would go run laps. So we went to the lake, and the teacher told us to run around the lake twice, and then we could be done for the day. Kat was the second slowest runner in class. I was the slowest. I finished one lap, and I felt ill. So I get halfway around the lake for my second lap. When my throat closes shut, I fell to my knees, gasping for air, trying to scream, but nothing comes out. I see Kat retreating, and I'm barely able to call out her name in a hoarse whisper. Somehow, she heard me, she saw me, and next thing I knew, she was carrying me, fireman style. A few minutes later, I heard the teacher screaming at her to stop, that she would fail, but Kat kept running. She ran a mile and a half with me on her shoulder, and brought me to the school nurse. When the nurse refused to administer the inhaler because she wasn't sure, Kat grabbed it and helped me use it. My heart started beating really fast, as they had grabbed the wrong inhaler, but I could breathe. Kat saw that something was wrong, and gave me a phone to type in my phone number, and she spoke to my parents, telling them to come quick. They took me home, and I rested. Kat didn't ever come back to school, but she told me later that when she saw me there, something took over, and she had to help me. In that instant of seeing me helpless and alone, she was the only one who could save me, and she did. She apologized for everything, and thanked me for changing her life for the better. If she hadn't grabbed me and hauled butt, no one would have gotten to me in time. She saved my life, and that act changed her forever. Last I heard, she was training to be a firefighter. There's something very wrong and very beautiful when both the pay teacher and the nurse were so inept, at the same time that your enemy saved your life. Thanks for sharing. I bullied this one boy and one girl when I was a kid. Don't know why really. I simply did. The boy was younger than me and I made him go home every time I saw him at the playground. If he wouldn't, I'd slap him around a bit until he did. The girl was my age and much bigger than me, but I was still the bully. I stopped bullying the boy on his first day of school. My first day of 3rd grade. He saw me in the schoolyard and immediately started crying and ran inside. That's when I realized he was actually afraid of me and the bullying stopped being funny. The girl got me off bullying for good. We were at a 7-day vacation out of town, and I tortured that poor girl for days. Called her names. Pulled boards from under her mattress so she would fall. Rubbed toothpaste on her hands while she was sleeping. All kinds of nasty crap. On the 5th day she finally had enough and just walked away. A 10-year-old kid walked away on her own into the woods. No one could find her the whole day. I actually got really scared that something would happen to her because of me. She finally appeared in the evening, alive and well. She was hiding nearby and watched us look for her the whole day. Only came out when she got hungry. I never bullied anyone mentally or physically ever again. I was one mean kid. I have a feeling this will hit close to home for some people. In grade school I was kind of a bully. I say kind of, because it was mostly just kid stuff and I wasn't vindictive about it like some of the kids in school were. But nonetheless I was not a stellar person. In about 6th or 7th grade, my mom got cancer. For a few years, it felt like nothing could ever go right for me, and it felt like it was never my fault. In high school, once most of these things had passed, and I was back to my normal semi-bullying ways, an older friend of mine, who I had confided in during the rough years, put it this way: you know that feeling when everything seems like it's going against you and you had no hand in causing it? That's what kids that get bullied constantly feel like. Why are they refuse the right to enjoy their interests and do what they want? I was flabbergasted. For weeks I went around the high school apologizing to kids I had bullied because I felt like such a piece of crap. As someone who was bullied so much I had to eat lunch in the stalls and the bathroom for over a year, this thread has peed me off. There's a lot of I was and but because I was stupid then, but I eventually decided it was wrong, so everything's probably okay now. No, everything's not okay now. Some of us still carry the scars into adulthood because you were too stupid to realize the consequences of your actions. What are you doing now? Are you actively trying to dissuade bullying from happening when you have the chance? I sure hope so. There's also a lot of I became a bully to my bully and that bothers me. Because, see, no one had any freaking excuse to bully me. I did nothing. I sat in class and read. In gym class I was called a slimy, disgusting little worm by girls who had never spoken to me before. I was put in a small room throughout gym, alone, so they wouldn't bully me. They were mean but the teachers isolated me. I loved rabbits and often read books about them, wore t-shirts with them, had a bag with a bunny on it, would draw them in class. This led to 2B concocting a story about finding a mother rabbit, slitting her belly and stringing her up in front of her babies. They laughed when I broke down. I was also passing by when a group of girls were sharing the story of Bloody Mary by a bathroom and challenging each other to go in with the lights off and say her name. I was just passing by. I got dragged in and they put their full weight on the door. They wouldn't let me out even after I panicked and screamed. I didn't have any friends to defend me. Some teachers did defend me. I didn't even think the word friend was real for years. Up until my late 20s I thought it was a lie. I am still not able to trust people, for the most part, because even though I am kind, people will eventually either be mean to me or get close to me and decide it's okay to emotionally abuse me, that I'm not worth being kind to. My good behavior, which should logically get good behavior in return, doesn't. That's fricked up. People who hurt people unprovoked are fricked up. My abilities, my compassion, none of it matters. You make people feel like they don't matter. You are weak if you bully. Do you understand that? Anyone can hurt anyone. Anyone can break something or hit something. It takes no skill. Building people up, holding them when they cry, making time for them, nurturing them. That is strength. Not everyone can do that. My tormentors realized exactly how much it was bothering me. Every single one of them. That is why they did it. So I suspect a lot of you aren't being completely honest when you say you didn't understand the consequences, or only bullied your bully. And that is disgusting. I suspect I'm going to be downvoted. It happens sometimes when I talk about how much I am hurting. Let me just point out that downvotes don't help. They don't soothe anyone. They don't resolve anything. I started to realize that the isolation I felt was caused by my own actions, and surprisingly I noticed that people were much friendlier and kinder when I started treating them with dignity and respect. It, predominantly male bullies. As a girl who was mercilessly bullied in high school, makes me sad that most never realize or own up to their behavior. Girl bullying is awful. To be fair, Reddit has a lot more males than females. Something like 80% of Redditors are male. That's why a lot of post responses in any given sub seem to be coming from a man. Not generally a bully, just with this one kid. Like a lot of the others posting, I didn't even realize how much it was bothering him. For me, it was just a little bit of joking around. One day we were all playing a game of tag or something like that, and he deliberately set up an ambush for me. I was bigger and faster than him, so he never had a chance. I instinctively took one shot at him, hit him in the stomach. But the fact that he went so far out of his way to set up the whole encounter kind of made me realize that I was the problem here, and the fight didn't go beyond that. We didn't become best friends or anything afterwards, but I left him alone after and we seemed to be okay. As a girl, I liked playing rough with the boys in elementary school, and by playing rough, I mean kicking, hitting and punching them whenever I got the chance. This led to girls being afraid of me, and more boys keeping me company and attracting more male friends with the phrase, "If you can't stand a hit from her, then you aren't a real man." This one time, as we were playing, I threw a bottle full of water, not caring where it landed as long as it hit a boy. It hit the smallest, kindest and quietest guy in our class. He cried. I came and told him the usual. "Did it hurt that much? Here, you can hit me back." While I offered him the bottle, he shook his head and cleaned his face. "It's alright. I forgive you." It hit me so freaking hard. I kept thinking about it all day and cried when I got into my room after school. It felt gross to be me. Why did I do that? What was wrong with me? So I never hit anyone again, unless the other party agreed we would do so. I kept wrestling and doing martial arts with everyone, though I set clear limits and a safe word if it was too much. Did karma came back at me? Nah, but everything got way better since. One of the guys whom I punched the most asked me out later on, while kids from smaller grades came looking for me to deal with their bullies. I had quite the fame, so it just took a casual chat with their bullies to make them stop. As a bonus, my younger brother was never messed with because of it, which I'm very grateful for because he's the exact opposite of me at his age. Fragile, sensible and really noble. After moving on from elementary school, I never saw the quiet boy again, but I see so much of him in the way my lil bro acts, as a reminder of my wrongs and who I must aspire to be. I was the bullied guy in this story. We had our 20-year reunion a while ago, and I made an offhanded comment to a classmate when I saw him for the first time at the party. "Good to see you, Mark. You were always my favorite bully. TLDR. He ended up sobbing on my shoulder with honest to God remorse within 30 minutes. I bullied my male classmates throughout elementary school because I wanted people to think I was strong. I'm female and grew up with brothers, so everything came down to me being better than the boys. One day in 5th grade, my group of girlfriends, also bullies, turned on me and verbally and physically hurt me. I realized what it was like to be on the other side and started sticking up for the kids who were bullied instead. Yeah, my bullies won't be on here. I see them on social media. They also include my older brother, and none of them changed. I guess not everyone matures. Also, this wasn't America. It was North Africa, and to survive as a guy was to beat up others or get beaten up yourself. Not a bully, but someone who was bullied. I beat the ever-loving crap out of my bully. He used to have this habit of jumping on my back and humping me for some reason. He was a senior in high school and I was a freshman. One day I dodged and he went face first into a desk. When he was on the floor, I began to stomp on his face. I was saying something too, but I forgot what. The bullying ended after that. You gave him the ole Rafi. Realizing that bullying people doesn't make others like you, I learned relevantly fast. A semester of high school, and I apologized to the person who I bullied. After that we became best friends and kinda laugh about it. Bullying to make Blair like you is interesting. I've never heard that. There was a girl in my science class who was kinda a social outcast but super clever. I bullied her because 1. I was jealous at how easy she found school. 2. My friend was bullying too. When I left secondary school I grew up a lot and realized I was really nasty to her for no reason. Ended up contacting her and apologizing. She's now training to be a doctor, and I genuinely wish the best for her. Not me, but this guy who came in for tech support at my uni's library went on about how he bullied the bullies. Stopped when he realized that those guys were like that because of household issues. There was this kid much smaller than me that would constantly watch FNAF and Undertale videos. I hated the games and still hate them, but one day he drew one of the characters and I couldn't help but love the drawing. It was that good. I don't like the games, but I don't pick on anyone for liking something that I don't anymore. I was a terrible bully for most of my childhood. I never beat anyone up, but I engaged in a lot of psychological torture manipulation. I was the only black kid in my school, so to avoid being teased and singled out and harassed, I played the gang leader and teased others. I was also a lot smarter than other kids my age, so teachers loved me and I used that to my advantage a lot. I would get kids in trouble, spread rumors, break up friendships, and body shame. The worst thing I ever did. I cringe thinking about it to this day. I lied and said a little boy called me the N-word. His parents and my parents were called into a meeting with the principal and he was forced to apologize to me. I kept my cool and he lost it, and his parents eventually forced him, through tears, to apologize to me. I'm sure they punished him a lot more at home. I'm not saying this to brag. It actually haunts me still. And if that kid became a lifelong racist I couldn't blame him. It's easily the worst thing I've ever done. And I never stop thinking about it. I've taken the Jussie Smollett hoax pretty personally as well. Which brings me to the turning point. I wish it were a moment of empathy, or an intellectual revelation that brought me around to loving and ethical relations with my fellow humans. But really it was biology. I figured out I was gay in the 9th grade, and understood pretty quickly that I could not get away with teasing, manipulating, and hurting people without becoming a major target myself. So I made friends. I learned to be trustworthy and vulnerable. I developed values that prioritized kindness over power. And despite the tremendous guilt I still feel from my days as a bully, I can say easily that I'm a lot happier now. Capital I. If you know how to contact the kid that you lied about, you owe it to his family and yourself to come clean and apologize. I hate to use this phrase, but I guess I was one of the popular kids in high school, meaning I just knew a lot of people from sports and other clubs that branched out across multiple grades. From grades 9-12 I used this popularity to make some pretty relentless jokes against people I didn't like or did genuinely like. I would say outrageously offside things about people, and I unfortunately have the ability to determine what an individual's biggest insecurity is, and I'd go for that. I never physically hurt anyone, but I know I hurt a lot of feelings by saying jokes that were almost never warranted. I guess my turning point was maturing. Once I left the bubble that is high school, I realized how awful I had been to my peers without any repercussions for myself. One of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately is 10 or 20 years in the future when these people are gonna flip through their yearbook and see my photo and tell their spouse or kid how big of a douche I was, and you know what? They'd be absolutely right to do that. I am ashamed of who I was and have actively been trying to become a friendlier and kinder member of society. I still deal with a lot of the same insecurities I struggled with years ago, but I've realized now that my problems aren't a reason to treat others like crap. If I could do it all again, I'd do it a lot differently. I never want to be that person again. About sophomore year I realized how fricked the culture was in my school. We had a group of accepted kids. Generally, the accepted were either rich, athletic, or good looking. No in between. I was in the accepted group, and bullying anybody less than us was the norm. We had a kid in football who was so poor, he would wear the same blue jeans to practice every day. We called him Blue Jeans. He was also mentally handicapped. The older guys would frick with him constantly. A major example of this were two guys, jacked, butt naked, twerking on him in stormtrooper masks, bare man butt all in his face. Another was a friend of mine choke slamming him in practice, and Blue Jeans running crying to the locker room. I soon distanced myself from the crowd and got shunned by many. I began calling people out on their bulls. If anyone on here is being bullied, especially in high school, just remember this isn't the rest of your life. The people that bully you are nobodies and probably internally hate themselves. Just focus on you and how you want your future to be. Basically what I'm saying is, your bullies can suck your butt. Frick high school in rural Oklahoma, man. I was the girl who said what everyone was thinking, but actually what I was saying was mean and cruel and not helpful. As an adult, there's so much mean stuff I said or did that surfaces when I'm trying to go to sleep. Hurt people hurt people. I came from a family situation where I was hurt, so I made sure to hurt everyone else. It took me losing a lot of friends, my one true love, and growing into an adult with frequent altercations before I was able to recognize my attitude for what it was: rotten. There wasn't one single moment but a series of small opportunities to present myself differently and be positive. I guess at a certain point I wanted to feel love instead of always feeling hurt by self-inflicted wounds. I wanted to be perceived differently, because once you establish yourself as a mean girl in high school, the people around you kind of enforce that. For me that carried on into adulthood, and I got to a point where I had to make a decision between two paths, and one was difficult and the other was significantly more loving and positive, but required me to learn to think positive thoughts. I still have to reframe my perceptions manually, but the change is sticking. Sometimes I'm shocked that people like me, because for so long I was a friend that no one really liked but was still invited to outings, like the token bully. But then I remember it's because I'm not trying to be a dong to everyone anymore. An ex told me right before dumping me that I was a huge butthole, not just to her but to people in general. I really reevaluated how I was treating others after that. Realized I had a lot of people to apologize to, but I could at least redeem myself. Maybe you should thank your ex for giving you the clarity to change your ways. She could have easily left you in the dark about your negative behaviors, but instead wanted you to understand this about yourself. It sounded like this person actually cared about you. Hamlet. Our English teacher explained what the queen meant when she said, "Methinks the lady doth protest too much." Anyways, I was notorious for picking on gay kids, which meant everyone must think I am a closeted gay overcompensating. Long story short, I gave up bullying because it was too gay. Jesus. I wish so bad every day that I could tell everyone that I picked on that. I'm so sorry for being so crappy. I was bullied myself and it made me mean. I did it. I think she noticed I had changed via social media, so when we bumped into each other, we sat and talked. I honestly thought I tormented her and felt guilty for years. She said she knew I was a decent person just dealing with raging teenager hormones, and she was proud I turned into a decent person. I wanted to cry with relief. I'm not sure I was much of a bully, but I was kind of in butthole when I was a kid. Had no problem picking on other kids. In my circle of friends when I was in 5th grade, there was one who I picked on and teased a lot. Once I got him so mad he called me out for a fight after school. So we fought in the breezeway by the school. It was mostly lame kid stuff, grappling and crap talk. At one point he had me in a sort of headlock and I reached my arm over and punched him in the face. Then twisted out of the hold, pinned him on the ground. He didn't submit until one of the other kids found some dog crap and stuck it under his face. Anyway, that whole thing was way beyond what I ever wanted. The feeling of my fist on his face. I didn't ever want to do that again to anyone, and I respected him a lot for not putting up with my crap, and for how long he held out. I did a lot of thinking and changed how I treated people, and I never got into a physical fight with anyone after that. In his case, I think he took it different. Started lifting weights and getting strong. We made up and stayed in the same circle of friends. And by 8th grade he was pretty bulked up and could have kicked my butt anytime if he wanted. But we got along. One of my best friends. How the frick do you type that first paragraph and still not think you were that much of a bully? Have you ever encountered a bully years later? How did it go? This happened to me. In elementary school, this kid punched me in the chest. It was like 2nd grade, but I never forgot it. Apparently, he didn't either. Around high school age, 16 or so, I ran into him at a local minor league game. As soon as I saw him, I had a flashback to that moment. I said hey to him, asked how he had been, and then he says, "Do you remember that time I punched you in Ms. Woody's class?" I replied, "Yeah, actually, I do." Then he blew my mind with, "That was a crappy thing of me to do, and I want you to punch me back right now. I deserve it." Now, adult me would have said no and just accepted the apology, but 16-year-old me thought it sounded like an excellent idea. I agreed and punched him square in the chest. It hurt him a bit. I immediately felt like a huge butthole. Like, all of a sudden, I was the bully. I was down to the level he was back in 2nd grade. With that one punch, he became the bigger man. I immediately apologized to him. He accepted and we went on our separate ways. I really think I learned a couple of life lessons in that one moment. People grow up and revenge isn't always sweet. This happened to me in elementary school. This kid punched me in the chest. It was like 2nd grade, but I never forgot it. Apparently, he didn't either. With that one punch, he became the bigger man. So you lost both times. Ouch. Actually, one of the kids who used to pick on me worst in grade school ended up becoming one of my best friends after several years of non-contact. The first meeting after years, in a bar, went something like this. Him, "Yeah, sorry about that. Kind of a dong move on my part." Me, "Kids are buttholes. It happens." Him, "Cool. Let's drink." Had another bully, incidentally, send a random Facebook message out of the blue one day apologizing for his behavior, owing to some kind of karmic debt he felt he owed. Side note, I don't expect this story to go over particularly well, on account of everyone seems to want to hear a look who came out ahead in the end narrative, but I think my own is a nice story, and a reminder that at least some of those kids who picked on you in school were as young and stupid and confused as you were. Truth be told, my youth was pretty miserable, but in retrospect, I wouldn't have changed much, because I think it shaped who I am, and, in the end, I'm pretty happy with who I am. I was bullied in elementary school and HS, around the time I got glasses. Because of this, there was this one guy I ended up bullying in HS. He was weaker and didn't really have any friends to help him. I never beat him up or anything, just scare him a little. Let him think I was going to hurt him, maybe even chase him around. This was about 18 years ago. If I ever had the chance, I would certainly apologize to him. Having been bullied myself, I knew how wrong it was. I just didn't want to be the lowest man on the totem pole. I've tried looking him up on Facebook, hoping to apologize, but he has one of those very common names that gives you 1,000 results. I frequently think of him and hope he's led a fulfilling life. If you're out there, Jason, I am sorry. If you bullied him, he is probably on here. The guy that bullied me at school dropped dead age 18 in his mum's kitchen. Massive brain hemorrhage. 15 years later, I still don't know how to feel about that. I was never bullied. I was not the bully. I was the guy that had friends in all the groups from the jocks to the geeks. Middle and high school was grand for me. I was really lucky. I did, however, have a friend that was bullied to no end. That I always seemed to be backing up and pulling out of trouble. To be honest, he was a little slow but had the biggest heart in the world. His last name was really odd and that did not help him at all. Anyway, I had not seen him for like 20 years. I was on a training some guys in a large city and was walking down the sidewalk and heard, "Hey, reduced fat gif. Hey man." I turn around to see a well-dressed monster of a dude. I am talking 6 feet 5, 250 plus and running across the street towards me. Built like a brick shit house and sporting really heen suit, tie, and looked to be dressed like a CEO. I just stood there trying to place him. He gets up to me, tosses out a handshake and says, "It's me, full fat gif." As I look at this guy, I can't believe my eyes. He looked like freaking Adonis. I am telling you, in high school this guy was as ugly as they come. Zits, skinny as a rail, sick all the time, just having a heck of a hard time. Come to find out, they had him on all kinds of screwed up drugs as a kid and he was just really messed because of it. We caught a couple drinks at the corner pub and caught up right then and there. Turns out he got really lucky in the .com run. Got out, and is now kicking it old school with his pile of money. By old school I mean he started up an Now the Go-Go company and was in the middle of venture capital push to secure more funds. I now have a standing offer to come to work if I ever want to move. Sometimes it pays off and karma comes back to you. I really was stunned and happy see that his life got turned around after they got him off the meds. Fixed a couple typos. That's awesome. Actually funny you should bring it up. I was a pretty good kid, not a fighter at all. Mid-30s now. In grade 7 there was this loud annoying bully that generally ignored me, but once shoved me backwards into his friend who was kneeling behind me waiting to trip me. Not expecting the sudden attack, I went over his friend and smashed my head on the ground. I told him he was a dong and pretty much freaking hated that prick for the rest of middle school. Cut to 3 years later, he dies in a car accident. It didn't make me feel good in the slightest, but it was kinda weird to hear about an butthole that was mean for no reason dying a tragic death. Then in high school there was this airbag douche. He went to a different school, who attempted to fight me, only to be pulled off by a passing adult. In the process of getting dragged away he told me he was going to kill me. For the next 6 months I was terrified that this guy was going to stab me or something. I never ran into him. Cut to several years later, I'm working at a downtown gym, putting myself through college, and who walks in? Aforementioned douche. As fate would have it, I am now taller than him, and easily 50 pounds heavier. We exchange looks. He gets sheepish, and I say, hey, remember that time you said you were going to kill me? He looked down embarrassed and said, yeah man, sorry about that. I was such a dong back then. We both laughed. About 6 months later I see in the paper that died in a car accident with his wife. I was sad. Remind me not to mess with you. I was really popular early on in school until one day when this girl went around to all of my friends telling them that I hated them. Apparently that was enough to warrant 8 years of being teased and ignored by a class of only 70 something kids. At that point I was pretty badly teased. The worst thing that these kids tried to do to me, with this girl as their leader, was tell their parents that my dad abused me, which created a whirlwind of police drama for my family for no good reason. Anyway, I go to church once a year for the sake of my grandma, and I guess this girl just happened to be there. She came up to me and apologized. She said she drove all of those people against me because at the time, everybody ignored her and she was jealous of my looks and popularity. I was mostly just astounded that anybody would even care at that age. Anyway, I wish I could say I was vindictive and did something really cool, but I didn't. I never really got my revenge. We exchanged Facebooks and it sounds like she is having a pretty hard life as it is. Despite the fact that I got the brunt of some really bad teasing, I sort of feel bad for ex-bullies. I think people underestimate how crappy it feels knowing you have caused somebody pain. There was a girl who bullied me through grades 3-5. I was by no means the only girl she picked on, and she got away with it every single time. Prime example, once a snake found its way into my mother's car. Florida it happens, and when she overheard me gleefully telling my friends about it, she told me that she had caught the snake and planted it in my backpack. A total lie, of course, but at age 7 I believed her. I was more scared of her than ever and did pretty much whatever she said. Of course, down the line I would have figured out that what she said was a total lie if I hadn't forgotten about it. It wasn't until I read her obituary last year that I remembered the situation. She was murdered and dumped in a motel after messing up a drug deal. So yeah, I hope they find out who murdered her and put a snake in his backpack. A girl picked on me at my first camping trip as a Girl Scout. I ran away and hid behind a tent to cry. Last week she sent me a friend request on Facebook. I ignored it. Lame geek. Ignored it. Like a boss. In middle school I had a kid a grade older than me harass me all the time in one of my classes. He made me dread going to that class, and I was still young enough to keep going. My senior year of high school I get a job at the local dinner theater, and it just happened that he worked as a waiter there as well. All of my memories of him trying to grab my junk and demean me in front of the other kids in our class came welling up. I avoided him the first 2 weeks until finally he confronts me and says, "Hi, I'm Jeremiah. I don't think we've met yet." I tell him, "Are you kidding me? You made my life a living heck for a full year." He gets this look of sincere pain on his face and says, "I am so sorry man. I was a total jerk at that age and I fully apologize. What can I do to make it better?" We worked together for about a year and got along great. We still see each other from time to time too, so I'd say it went pretty well. I had this guy who started with me almost every day from 7th grade through high school. I'll call him Carl. Carl was about 6 feet 6 inches, and I was the next biggest kid that wasn't on steroids. I wasn't afraid to get in a fight with this kid, but I knew it would be the never-ending battle. If I beat him up, the next day, he'd probably bring a bat. If I took the bat away and beat him up again, he would probably bring a knife. I thought the guy had a screw loose, and it would just escalate, so I just avoided him as much as possible. My first summer back from college, I run into Carl at a party, where everyone is drinking. I figure, oh crap, all these years I've avoided this schmuck, and now I'm going to have his drunken butt start a fight. The opposite happened. He walks up to me and says, "I want to apologize for being a dong to you for all those years." I stood there in total and complete shock. I said, okay, but just curious. Why were you like that? He then completely opens up and tells me about how his father was smacking him around all those years, calling him crap all the time, and how he hated seeing me walk onto the bus or into school pretty content with things. We ended up talking for about an hour over a beer. Fast forward to about another year later. I'm taking a break from college, working out of town for this business setting up computers. I get a call from my dad asking, "Didn't you know Carl and go to school with him?" I say, "Yeah, why?" My dad tells me he's on the front page of the local paper in handcuffs. He confessed to killing his girlfriend. He beat her to death in a rage, and then drove to his parents' house and turned himself into the police. My reaction was simply no. Fast forward 19-20 years to today in 2010. Cole was released from prison on parole earlier this year and is now residing in a halfway house. I blame Carl for what he did, but I also blame his father for taking part of Carl's life and planting the rage in him through years of abuse that cost his girlfriend her life. I just think it's a shame, because for a moment there, I saw him trying to take a better path in life, even though he didn't. Take what lessons you will from this, if there are any to be taken from this tragedy. Thank God it wasn't Lenny. My high school bully runs a successful landscaping business, is uber buff and has a smoking hot girlfriend. They own a condo together. Meanwhile I am single and have 36k in university debts. How the frick do I compete with that? I used to get bullied all the time in school. In fact, it was so bad that years, even decades later, I used to sit alone in the dark and think up sweet revenge scenarios and act them out in my head. When none of them came to pass, I started to post them on the internet as if they actually happened. That sounds healthy. When I was in 6th grade, this girl used to rag on me really hard for reading Shakespeare and being nerdy. She was terrible all of school. Then I went to boarding school and came out of my shell. Fast forward to 2nd year of college. One of my best guy friends called me and asked if I could sell him a little weed cause this girl who was trying to frick him wanted to get high. Being the kind and curious friend, I say sure, bring her by and have my roommate let you in. I walk in and this bee is sitting on my bed. I walk in and just stared at her. She started talking really quickly, acting like it was so great to see me, etc. etc. I just looked at Jacob and said, "Get this bee out of my house." He looked at me, then looked at her and said, "Well, she drove, so I'll just stay over tonight. She can leave. Begone." And she left. We got high and played Mario Kart while she called him crying, wanting him to come hang out with her. I'd cry too if I got kicked out of somewhere and then discovered I'm missing out on Mario Kart. One of my bullies from grade school, oh, they were numerous, became my stepbrother. His dad married my mom and I met him for the first time at the wedding. Pretty weird to see your bully for the first time in 10 years in a church and wearing the same tux as you. We shook hands and didn't say anything about it because we were there for the family. Then, it was such a good time, and our two families melded together well. I started to get his history. His mother died when he was very young and he was raised mostly by his father. I started to understand him as the person behind the childhood bully, and it made sense. Bullies are people, too, and somebody's brother. A kid 2 years older used to pick on me all the time growing up, and was always bigger than me. Went with him to school from kindergarten through high school. I guess we got along at times, but for the most part he was a bully. Years later, in first year college, we had a house party and he showed up. which I was none too happy about. I knew the bastard would steal something. Next day, I couldn't find my jacket, and I knew he'd taken it. The jacket was special to me because my girlfriend at the time, now wife, had bought it for me. While I was with a friend, I saw him in the mall a couple weeks later and he was wearing it. I guess he hadn't realized that in the time since elementary school, I had actually become a pretty big guy, around 6 feet 0 and 180 pounds or so, while he was hovering around 5 feet 6 and maybe 160 pounds. I walked right up to him and told him bluntly, give me my freaking jacket. He just stared at me and tried to blow it off by saying something like, this is mine. I bought this, small town in backwoods Canada, and it was Old Navy brand. There isn't an Old Navy within 300 miles of there. I told him once more, give it to me. Now, he slowly took it off and handed it over to me. As he did, I said, yeah, that's right, which he uncomfortably chuckled at. Then I just walked away. Best part, his girlfriend was standing there the entire time just watching. Maybe it was his jacket and in reality you mugged him. Let's just say I am the product of the ugly duckling syndrome. I was awful, but grew up into an attractive woman. A boy in high school who I had a crush on used to pick on me, tease me, and make me feel awful. Flash forward to present day, 7 years later, and I find him applying for a job at my employer. He was shocked to see me, that's for sure. We chatted it up, had a nice conversation, and I learned that he was applying for a minimum wage job to make ends meet. He asked to take me out later that afternoon, and I simply said, no thank you, I am taken. You haven't apologized for bullying me in high school either, you know, and I smiled sweetly and left. The hiring manager called me later and asked what that was all about, because she was in earshot. I told her, no hard feelings. He was hired on. A boy in high school who I had a crush on used to pick on me, tease me, and make me feel awful. He probably liked you. Hey Mike, how are you doing? Oh hey Steve, I'm doing well, how are you? I'm doing GR. Yeah, I'm going to need a half pound of ham, sliced extra thin. Thanks buddy. Yes, went to high school with a guy who was viciously antagonistic. Not a physical bully so much as just constantly mocking certain people who he perceived to be below him in the social hierarchy. Like, cruel mockery, unending, constant, every second of every day. You just knew every time you passed him in the hallway you were going to hear the same crap, insults, etc. 10 or so years later I pull into my car dealership to get some service work done. The guy who comes out to greet me has a very familiar face. I wonder if it could be him. The name tag doesn't have his name on it, but the name it does have on it is something like Buddy or something like that, a nickname. So, I'm walking to the desk trying to decide if it's him or not. Then I see it, the hand. He has a very obvious birth defect related to his hand, and now I'm certain it's him. I don't even bother to bring it up, but I certainly savor every moment of him calling me sir and offering me coffee and a free ride to work. I read that as viciously agnostic and was very confused for far too long. There was a boy who used to pick on me in middle school and high school until he died in a flaming car wreck. Of course, he was a driver, drinking, and 2 others in the vehicle were injured. One of those is now pregnant, the other was in the hospital for 10 months. Anyway, all I could think about was that I didn't feel bad that he died. I didn't feel any remorse or sympathy for the still living family he had. I read in the papers that he was such a great kid and was so friendly and cheerful. No, he wasn't. He was not great and he certainly wasn't friendly. He was in butthole, and though I'm not glad that he's dead, I'm not discontented with the fact that he's not alive. A confusing emotion, this hatred for buttholes. Don't get in car wrecks, you'll end up pregnant. Saw one of my bullies several years back. She was fatter than she was in HS, which was pretty fat, married to white trash with kids, living the poor redneck life. I had a quiet little moment of smugness before going on about my day. I picked on a kid for a while in 8th grade. Our middle school was 6'8", so I guess I was finally on the top of the crap pile for once. I felt terrible about it later on in life. I ran into that kid about 10 years later at a bar. He was still nerdy and awkward. I bought him a drink, said yeah, I was in butthole back then, and we had a good evening of it all. Now he's one of my closest friends and he even let me know he was going to ask his GF to marry him before anyone else knew. TLDR, it's never too late to make things right. One of the many bullies that picked on me in high school ended up dating my cousin a few years after college. He never put 2 and 2 together. Me and my cousin have the same last names. So when we met again for the first time at a bar he looked pretty horrified. After exchanging pleasantries for a while, I honestly didn't really care about the bullying anymore. He took me aside and explained how deeply sorry he was and how he really loved my cousin. The man was practically begging for my approval. To be fair, he seemed like a reformed dude, so I kept reassuring him that it was all cool. This should have given me a ton of satisfaction, but for some reason it didn't. Like I said, I just didn't care anymore. I honestly believe that I got over the traumatizing bullying I went through in high school once I got to college. I remember being told there was a $2 protection fee by this guy and his buddy in a rundown neighborhood. I almost laughed because it was kind of cliche. Told him there was no way he is getting money out of me and that he was a waste of my time. Later in life I saw him at a crosswalk downtown, rundown jacket and clothing, sporting a pregnant wife and a child in a stroller. I actually thought about how much more valuable $2 was to him than I. Then I ran him over with my car. I like your style. She wound up going to the same college as me. She apologized to me for crap that was pulled years ago when she saw me on campus 3 years ago. This semester we awkwardly sit next to each other in con law class. I don't really speak to her. At least she was big enough to apologize. I was a bully, and the guy I bullied is one of the strongest, most self-confident guys I know, and holds no ill will towards me. In fact, he's one of my best friends now. He is an amazing dude, and I am an butthole. I met my old bully at my 10-year high school reunion. The early puberty advantage he had on me in 6th grade had clearly run its course as I was a good 6 inches taller than him. He was divorced, sporting a goatee, had a well-denied beer belly and spent the night bragging about his boat repair business. Just seeing his patheticness was reward enough for me. I was an elementary school bully. I was the biggest kid in class and a complete jerk up till the 6th grade. My JR high years sucked. For some reason I was now the smallest kid and paid dearly for my years of abuse. I got beat up several times, and was once hooked to the flagpole by my underwear and dragged up approximately 15 feet before the principal came out and ran the other kids off. Lesson learned. I bled. I deserve it. Change me. Salutes your shorts. I guess this wasn't constant bullying, more of a one-time thing. In all honesty, I think this guy was just looking for someone to punch. As it happens that was me. I don't even recall what exactly happened. My friend had gone in a shop while I waited outside and I just remember him walking up to me, saying something and then punching me in the face. He was about 16 at the time and I was about 12. Not only did it hurt, it scared the crap out of me and I was scared to go out for quite a while afterwards. Turns out he tried to rob an old man a few months later. The poor old guy tried to defend himself and in a panic, the guy who punched me stabbed him in the head with a screwdriver, killing him instantly. He's serving a lengthy term in prison. It's been about 7 or 8 years of his life he's wasted now and I'm not afraid to say I hope he freaking rots in there. Why is everyone in here 6 feet 4 inches or taller? I guess no one tells those stories where you were the short kid and then you stayed short. Those stories aren't interesting. In middle school there was this kid who used to bully me. At one point I got a call from him asking me for homework help at 10 PM at night or some such hour. Bedtime for middle school me. I told him no. He calls me back, not 2 minutes later, saying his mom wants to speak to me. She asked me why I wouldn't help him. I told her that she wouldn't have helped him either if he treated her like he treated me in school. She said thanks and hung up the phone. I never had problems with him again. When I was little I was an absolute train wreck. Overweight, glasses, braces that is, a chubby little target. When I was in 1st grade these 2 8th graders, Larry and whatever the other guy's name was, used to torture the heck out of me. The nuns were useless and ignored my broken stuff and general freaked out state no matter what I said. Fast forward about 15 years and I'm with this group of people, and who happens to be there? Larry. I sort of recognize him, but now he's about 5 feet 9 inches and maybe 160 pounds. Certainly not the giant he was in the playground. Anyway, I sort of steer the conversation to where are you from? Where did you go to school etc, and I can see the light bulb go on in his head. He's standing there staring at me. I should mention I'm now 6 feet 4 inches and about 230 pounds. Minus the glasses and braces of course. After a few really awkward seconds, the guy he was hanging out with says, "Hey, Larry, isn't it really funny that you used to torture this dude and now he could snap you like a freaking twig? That's pretty funny, right? I'd really like to see that." He said he was sorry. I said no worries. Sorry, that wasn't very exciting, but you would have needed to see the look on Larry's face. Yeah, a few of my ex-bullies are now my friends on Facebook. I have a hard time holding grudges about things that happened when we were 8. Most of them did the same thing I did after elementary school. Grew up, got a job, and raised a family. I've read a lot of posts that seem to conclude with some sort of moral retribution or apology. It's great to hear this because my only experience of bullying is awful. A boy at my school was bullied harshly for around a year. I never got to know him at all due to the streaming system of the school and was only made aware of his trouble when our year was called into an assembly to be told he had tried to kill himself. He never returned to school. Years later he appeared on the news for attempted murder in a shopping center where he worked and is now serving time in prison. He was obviously mentally unsound and I suspect he never really recovered from the abuse to which he was slave. The worst thing about this for me was that when the news story hit, the utter dongs who had bullied him all through school paraded the news story about social networking sites like a trophy. They reawakened his old names and had yet another laugh at his expense. Bullying is freaking terrible. Has anyone else been bullied by someone who went on to be rich and famous? If so, did it bother you? Vin Diesel's bodyguards knocked me over pretty hard at a NASCAR race while promoting the first Fast and the Furious. I was picked up by Vin Diesel and received an apology from Vin Diesel. Being like 8 years old and not knowing who he was, I was just pee all around. My mom, however, was just so excited. Vin Diesel once walked down the street with a boner. There were no survivors. To the OP, I once met Owen Wilson in St. Andrews. He was taking part in the Dunhill golf tournament. I was with my 6'8" rugby playing friend waiting for the loo when Owen tried to push past us rather rudely. My oversized friend picked him up and put him back in line. Owen responded with "I'm Owen Wilson." And my friend responded, "And you'll wait your turn." He waited. Haha, he's a dong. Dang, I wish I hadn't read all these things about Owen Wilson. It kind of breaks the magic of Midnight in Paris for me. Joel McHale from Community actually saved my friend from being bullied in high school. He was being harassed by some football players, and Joel, who's a pretty big guy, told them to frick off. Apparently he's a really nice guy. My dad got in a fist fight with David Schwimmer in middle school. He broke my dad's nose. I'm just laughing at the thought of awkward David Schwimmer getting into a fight. I have a friend who's from Brisbane. He says his friend's dad was punched in the face by Steve Irwin. This might not have been bullying since I don't know what age they were at the time. Also, I think punching people in the face is pretty normal in Australia. It's like a handshake, really. My girlfriend's uncle bullied Rowan Atkinson all through primary and secondary school, and for some reason he is proud of it. He is a complete douchebag. My aunt grew up in Manhattan Beach, California. There was a creepy weird dude who worked at the local video rental who was obsessed with films. He ended up finding her home phone number and calling to ask her out on a date. Her and her sisters just laughed at him, so I guess they were the bullies. His name was Quentin Tarantino. I can totally see him as being a creepy weird dude. My friend's dad was jumped and robbed by Sylvester Stallone. When he went to court, Stallone was sentenced to counseling, which is where he ended up taking acting lessons. Remember that scene from Napoleon Dynamite when he drew that pencil sketch of that girl and spent like 2 hours doing the shading on her lip? Her name is Emily Kennard. Tyndale, and she was a B to me in high school. So they did a decent job in casting her. John Travolta went to school with my uncle. My uncle was a bit of a misfit and didn't have many friends, but apparently, Travolta introduced him around and my uncle had him to thank. Pity about all the Scientology stuff now though. Not exactly bullying, but I live in Northern Ireland and my sister-in-law's dad once boxed Liam Neeson. Apparently Liam Neeson kicked his butt. Of course he did. He trained Batman and Obi-Wan. My mother was apparently bullied quite extensively by Jennifer Aniston and her clique in high school. She talks about it anytime she hears anything about the woman. I bet she's a big Angelina Jolie fan. A couple of my friends' parents went to school with Peter Jackson. They said he was a weird kid that didn't really talk to anyone and nobody really talked to him. Yep. It all makes sense. Reverse story. Christopher Kutcher, more commonly known as Ashton Kutcher, was the target of bullying and harassment at my middle school. He went from getting bullied by other middle schoolers to fricking Bruce Willis's ex. Quite a turnaround. Hey, my great aunt may have been your teacher. I just wish I could remember her last name now. La June something. She was a huge B if that helps. Not bullied, but my dad tutored Bo Jackson while they were both students at McAdory High School in Birmingham, Ayla. From what my dad said, Bo's grades were so bad that he almost didn't graduate. When Bo graduated, he promised my dad that one day when he'd made it big, he'd give him $1 million. It didn't happen. So every time my dad and I are watching football, or any other manner of show where Bo Jackson is involved, he always screams at the TV, "The butthole owes me $1 million." This isn't exactly bullying, but it is a pretty funny story. My ex-girlfriend's dad got beat up by Patrick Swayze when they were children. Apparently Patrick Swayze was cleaning up at his parents' dance studio, and my ex's dad walks up to the window, taps on it so Swayze will look around, and shouts F. Swayze ran outside and apparently beat the living crap out of him. You don't frick with the star of Roadhouse and get away with it. He didn't realize that Patrick Swayze is only nice until it's time to stop being nice. My old English professor is one of the writers for the show Supernatural. He told us that in high school he was made fun of a lot for his love of anime, karate and other Asian cultural things since he is white. The main character of Supernatural, sorry, I forget the name, went to the same school and was the only one out of his group of friends to show him any friendship and humility. Now they work together. You have no idea how badly I needed to know that Dean Winchester truly is the freaking boss. I have a friend who went to junior high with Lindsay Lohan, who moved to her town after making The Parent Trap. She said Lohan acted like she was God's gift to 8th grade, and every time she comes on the TV my friend would be like, "Frick your Lindsay." I always thought it was hilarious that she referred to a celebrity by first name. In the end, I guess the joke was on Lindsay Lohan. Now she is God's gift to entertainment writers, and Perez Hilton. Not me personally, but a friend of mine is from the same neighborhood as Justin Bieber and says he hates the little crap because he fricked up his grandmother's flower pots. That is some unforgivable crap right there. My friend was shoved out of an elevator by Mila Kunis because he pushed every button after she declared it her elevator. I tease my elevator, shut up Meg. The guy who bullied me went on to become mayor of our town. Fortunately, everyone in town hates him. There's no chance for him to get re-elected, and both his businesses are going bankrupt. My old English teacher was best friends with Anne Hathaway until about 7th grade, until they had a fight over a bag of potato chips or something and were never friends again. I went to high school with LeBron James. He wasn't directly a douche to me, but sometimes he'd come to parties and knock over the keg for no reason then leave. Because teenage drinking is wrong. LeBron got yo back. My buddy went to school with Joe Moore of the Twins. He was all states in 3 sports and recruited by every college football program in the nation. Basically, he was hot crap. Apparently nobody told him. However, since he spent most days helping out one of the mentally disabled students at school as a non-teacher aide. Thank you, Joe Moore, for being awesome and defeating stereotypes. I also remember a reporter for ESPN basically shadowing him for a weekend during the off-season a few years ago. Joe called the guy up and offered to take him to the airport when he was done shooting. Seems like a class act. This isn't bullying, I said, but still a douchey move. My friend works at the Apple store in the richest mall in Atlanta and Justin Bieber came in to buy a laptop. When he brought it up to the counter, he just threw a wad of cash at her and told her to count it out herself. She threw it back at him and refused to ring him up until he acted more respectful. From reading this entire thread, it seems like Justin Bieber is just a horrible person. Ben Stiller is a complete cocksucker who regularly belittles his assistants until they cry. Oh, and he wears makeup everywhere. It was many years ago, but I used to directly deal with him all the time for work. I knew his assistants and the way he treated them, all of them, was so upsetting it made me furious. The guy really treated them like crap and literally made them cry all the time. I have nothing good to say about him from my experience. Very, very sad. I went to school with Kate Hudson, and she wasn't a bully, but she was a conceited bee. I was in her Spanish class for 2 years and she would giggle in the back with all her group of friends and be flat out rude to our teacher. She was one of those girls who, when called upon to say something in Spanish, intentionally pronounces everything in a flat American accent and then giggles afterward because it wouldn't be cool to actually put forth an ounce of effort. The thing that really annoyed me about her success is that she originally became famous for playing a smiley, freewheeling hippie type, and that is so not who she was. My dad went to high school with Lance Armstrong. Lance was a big douche back then and ended up pulling my dad over on the side of the road. They were both driving and fighting. My dad kicked him in the nuts. Suddenly, testicular cancer. On the other side of the coin, my husband went to high school with Natalie Portman and she was made fun at times for being ugly. Look who's laughing now. Pictures of ugly Natalie Portman, or it didn't happen. My dad lived down the street from Nicholas Sparks for about a year when he was little. One day my dad was walking his dog and Nicholas Sparks said that his dog could kill my dad's dog. There are other stories of Nicholas Sparks' general douchebaggery, but that one is my dad's top reason that he hates The Notebook. All his books are the same. Well, this is the story of my friend's dad while he was in college. He went to Baghdad University, but basically one day while walking down the hall he bumped into another kid who was a freshman at the time. Realizing who he had bumped into, he apologized profusely, but to no avail. Uday Hussein, son of Saddam Hussein's bodyguards, promptly beat him into a coma. What a tarnish on the good Hussein name. A kid who bullied me all throughout grade school and high school went on to be in an awful and remarkably unsuccessful boy band several years ago called Wow. I think they opened for the Jonas Brothers a few times and were managed by the guy who founded 98 Degrees and a few other boy bands. Their songs were terrible, their personas and outfits were extremely tacky, and they disbanded after a couple of years. Watching the entire process unfold was extremely gratifying and I look forward to seeing him someday and mentioning that my kids are a huge fan of his art. Not me personally, but we went to elementary school and high school with Lindsay Lohan. She was kind of a bee to my friend. One time threw an ice cube at him and hit him in the eyeball, but he got the last laugh. At a high school party she got too freaked up and ended up crapping her pants. Karma. Plus there is that whole jail thing. True story, when my dad was in high school, his friend played in a garage band with Prince Rogers Nelson. Prince. My dad played in the band for a day, but he quit because he said that Prince is a major fucknoodle. A dude I had a crush on flipped his personality in high school and began being a massive jerk to me. Made fun of how I looked to the point I would cry in class. He is a fairly famous Olympian in a niche sport, but I would only be half surprised if he turned into one of the superstar heartthrobs of the games this year. After high school, I grew into myself and didn't look so awkward anymore. He has since apologized and now tells me how great I look every time we see one another. Throwaway, not super famous, but famous enough to pee me off. Went to high school with most of the guys from All Time Low. Total douchebags and buttholes. At least one is borderline illiterate, but I guess having rich daddies pays off if you want to be in a little girl's dream band. My husband always said that Mel Torme was his arch nemesis because he was a dong to him once when he was a claims adjuster at Farmers. We are not allowed to listen to his Christmas song, Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire. When he died, my husband went to his gravesite in Westwood and literally danced on his grave. Have a pic of him doing it somewhere. Wasn't really bullied, but the girl from Angus, Thongs and Perfect Snogging, Georgia Groom, was in my year at school and was one of those obnoxious bitchy girls. She came back after the filming and seemed even more full of herself. I never hated or resented her, I just remained in my state of disliking her, and apparently she didn't like the people that couldn't give two fricks and crap about the fact she was a famous actress. My dad was friends with Steve Carell in high school. He said Steve was a really sweet guy. I looked through his old yearbook and Steve looks exactly the same. If I went away at college right now, I'd post pictures. FFS for the 20 minutes I've spent here reading about Owen Wilson and him being in butthole. I've been confusing him for Ewan McGregor. No, don't do that. Frick Owen Wilson. I haven't liked him, but not Ewan McGregor. He's awesome. I was in the same Boy Scout troop as Tom Welling from Smallville. He didn't really bully me, but one time I was counting change and he smacked my hand up and all the change went flying, causing a ruckus. Then he got to play Clark Kent for like 10 seasons. What doesn't bother me is cheaper by the dozen. My dad almost fought Ben Affleck after he accidentally bumped into him at a bar and Affleck said, "Do you know who I am?" and my dad's friend replied, "Yay, you're the guy who hangs out with Matt Damon." Fortunately for my dad, Affleck's manager broke up the fight before it got bad. I don't know why, but your dad's friend's response made me laugh really hard. My mom was a phone company operator back in the day, when you had to dial 0 to set up an international call. Frank Sinatra called one night and harassed her and a friend pretty brutally. They got revenge by asking how to spell his name, which tweaked his huge ego. Mom is a badass. Only person to ever bully me in school now pretty much owns the town. He happens to be friends with my sister, and I told her that if I ever saw him, I'd punch him in the face in retribution, and explained why. I was serious. A few weeks later, he made it up to me, mostly as a joke, I'm sure, but it totally broke me. Actually made me cry after I realized how stupid it was to hold on to all that resentment for so many years. Huskistercraft. He became a real dong after he made it big on YouTube. I haven't talked to him in years. As nice as he appears, he is a very selfish person. Somehow, I could tell this just from watching his videos. My mom married into Matthew Perry's family. This is pre-Friends. He was on another show called Second Change or something like that. When I first met him and his family, I was 7 or 8 at the time. He basically ignored me and, at one point, told me to shut up because I wasn't a real member of the family. I only met him 3 times or so because my mom divorced out. They were all douches. I despised the popularity of Friends and never watched it until way after it went off the air. Good show. Christopher Reeve was renting out an apartment in their backyard and would often see him by the pool. Pre-frick my legs. I remember Superman was really nice. Not kidding. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.